You've probably heard about Caligula, Nero, maybe even Henry VIII. Kings so corrupted by power, their names became synonymous with depravity. But those men were amateurs, because deep in the heart of 19th century Spain, there reigned a man so twisted, so morally bankrupt, his name has been quietly buried under layers of sanitized royal history, Ferdinand VII. A name most people barely recognize. But behind that name lies the true story of a monarch who turned his court into a sadistic playground, whose obsession with sex, control, and decay crossed every imaginable boundary, and who redefined what it meant to be a monster in a crown. A king who mutilated love, fetishized death, and ruled like a demon dressed in velvet. This is the story of the most perverted king in history. Brace yourself, let's start with the myth, the soft, safe version they spoon-feed in textbooks. Ferdinand VII, the restorer of the monarchy, the hero who returned Spain to its throne after the chaos of Napoleon, the king who brought stability. But here's the truth, he was no restorer, he was rot-made flesh, and the closer you get, the more he stinks, because Ferdinand wasn't just a tyrant, was he? He was a predator. They called him El Rey Felon, the felon king, and trust me, he earned it. Let's start with what might seem tame, until you realize how deep it goes. Ferdinand was obsessed with virginity, not purity, not love, virginity, the untouched, the unspoiled, the controllable. He didn't want wives, he wanted property, and to him, a virgin bride was like owning a house no one had lived in, a blank canvas he could stain with his madness. His first marriage was arranged when he was just 17. He was married 4 times, and each time, he selected younger, more submissive women. But here's where it gets sick. Ferdinand's fascination with his wives didn't end in the bedroom. He recorded in obsessive detail their physical traits. He took pride not in love, but in domination. And when one of his wives died, that's when the darkness truly spilled over. When Maria Antonia, his first queen, passed away at only 21, Ferdinand insisted, demanded, on being present during her autopsy. Not because he was grieving, but because he wanted to make sure she had been faithful. Let that sink in. A grieving widower would cry over a body. Ferdinand, he dissected hers, and it wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. He had an appetite for control that extended beyond life. He wanted ownership of the body, even in death. But wait, it gets worse. Ferdinand's court wasn't just a monarchy, it was a pressure cooker of sexual politics, coercion, and voyeurism. He installed loyalists and spies throughout the palace, tasked with reporting on the behavior, especially the sexual behavior, of his courtiers. He controlled the marriages of noblewomen. He banned remarriages unless he personally approved of the man. He was the gatekeeper of love, the censor of desire, the pervert with absolute power. You don't learn this in history class, but Ferdinand even orchestrated fake virginity tests for court women, humiliating rituals where he watched his ministers investigate whether women were suitable for royal favor. And it wasn't about morality, it was about control. He didn't want passion, he wanted submission. But the darkest corners of this king's depravity, they were always linked to childbirth. Ferdinand VII wanted an heir more than anything, and that obsession led him to a place that's hard to describe without shivering. He turned his palace into a baby factory. After 3 of his wives failed to give him a surviving son, he grew desperate. Unhinged. He married his own niece, Maria Cristina, when she was just 23. He was 44, obese, sick, rotted, but desperate. He didn't just want children, he wanted them on command. He tracked his wife's cycles, timed their encounters like military operations. And when Maria Cristina became pregnant, Ferdinand's paranoia exploded. He placed guards outside her room, restricted her movements, even banned certain foods he believed could spoil the heir. And yet when the baby was born, it was a girl, not the boy he craved. So what did he do? He tried again, and again, and again. He became obsessed with creating a dynasty through brute force. But his body, failing, sagging, twisted by disease, couldn't keep up. His legs ulcerated, his breath stank, his teeth rotted, his mind decayed, and still, he demanded nightly visits from his young wife, because if he couldn't rule Spain forever, he would at least mold a new ruler from his own dying flesh. But the truth? It wasn't about fatherhood, it was about legacy, control, LIGO, and it cost him everything. He got his wish, sort of. Maria Cristina finally gave birth to a daughter, Isabella. But instead of joy, Ferdinand descended into madness. A girl. How could Spain be ruled by a girl? His court was torn in half. Factions erupted, those who supported Isabella and those who believed a woman could never rule. And what did Ferdinand do? He rewrote the law, just like that. Centuries of succession customs tossed aside, he passed the Pragmatic Sanction, a decree that allowed his daughter to inherit the throne, but not out of progressiveness. No, this wasn't feminism, this was control from the grave. He didn't want Isabella to rule Spain. He wanted to rule through her. And as he deteriorated, his body collapsing under the weight of syphilis, diabetes, ulcers, and years of gluttony, he clung to power like a feral animal. You don't learn this in school, but Ferdinand spent the final years of his life barely able to walk. His legs were blackened with necrosis. His breath reeked of infection. He could barely form coherent sentences. Yet still, he held court. Still, he signed decrees. Still, he raged. Because to give up power, even for a moment, was death. But death came anyway. And when it came, it was fittingly grotesque. Witnesses described his last days as inhuman. His face swollen, purple with rot, his body leaking pus and bile. He screamed in confusion, forgot his own name, and then silence. But death wasn't the end of Ferdinand's horror, because what happened next defied belief. His corpse began to decay at such a speed, the royal embalmers couldn't keep up. His stomach split, his face deformed, and when they sealed him in a royal coffin, lined with lead to contain the stench, it didn't hold. The gases built up, the coffin swelled, hissed, and then it exploded. The pressure from the decomposition blew the lid clean off. Pieces of the king, skin, bile, blood splattered across the crypt walls. And here's the detail that'll haunt your dreams. Dogs. Royal dogs kept in the monastery grounds reportedly licked the fluids that seeped from Ferdinand's burst tomb. The king, who spent his life obsessed with control, was reduced to sludge, devoured by strays. A grotesque end for a grotesque man. So now you know, Ferdinand VII wasn't just a tyrant. He wasn't just a failed monarch. He was something far darker. A man who weaponized sex, who fetishized death, who tried to mold history with his bare, bloodied hands, and ended up forgotten because his story was too disturbing to tell. But we're telling it now, because sometimes the monsters wear crowns. So what do you think? Was Ferdinand a product of royal madness? Or something worse, something evil? If the twisted truth behind Ferdinand VII shook you, if these rotting pages of history make you question everything they taught you in school, then maybe, just maybe, you should hit that subscribe button, because the past isn't dead, it's rotting, and it's leaking through the cracks. And trust me, you haven't heard anything yet.